Welcome, beautiful Sigma ladies. Sometimes the most radical act a woman can do is vanish from the crowd. It sounds dramatic, almost rebellious. But here's the unsettling truth. Studies show that nearly 60% of social interactions are driven by habit, not genuine connection. People are talking, posting, and smiling on autopilot like machines powered by fear of being left out. Now picture the Sigma female, the one woman who sees through this charade, suddenly deciding she's done pretending. No more obligatory hangouts, no more forced laughter at unfunny jokes, no more burning energy on empty conversations. She doesn't storm out, she simply steps back. And in doing so, she flips the entire social ecosystem upside down. The irony? The moment she stops trying to be social is the moment everyone starts noticing her absence. It's like a Wi-Fi signal. You don't appreciate it until it disappears, and then suddenly life feels unbearable. This isn't about mood swings or being antisocial. This is about what really happens when a Sigma female withdraws, and why her silence speaks louder than an entire crowd shouting. Number 1, she rediscovers the luxury of depth. When a Sigma female stops forcing herself to be social, something powerful happens to the way she chooses her connections. She no longer spreads herself thin across countless acquaintances, fake friendships, and shallow let's-hang-out circles. Instead, she begins to value depth over numbers. She would rather pour her energy into 1 or 2 people who matter than scatter it across dozens who don't. And that shift is not just a preference, it's a revolution in how she relates to the world. For years, society has convinced women that being liked by everyone is a badge of honor. Be friendly, be approachable, be the life of the party. But the Sigma female eventually realizes that this constant performance is draining her soul. So when she steps back from all that noise, she finally notices the quality of her relationships. Most of them weren't real to begin with. They were built on convenience, obligation, or surface-level entertainment. And the shocking part is, once she stops feeding them, they collapse almost instantly. What's left standing are the bonds that have substance. The rare people who don't need her to be on all the time, who don't demand endless small talk or social appearances, but who meet her in those rare spaces where silence, honesty, and vulnerability live. Those are the ones she now treasures. She's no longer afraid of having just 1 or 2 ride-or-die connections. In fact, she sees it as strength, because she knows those bonds can't be bought, faked, or replicated. This new focus on depth transforms her from being stretched too thin to being fully present. She doesn't just listen, she absorbs. She doesn't just check in, she invests. The people who remain in her circle feel her presence more intensely than a crowd of 50 ever could. And that intensity has weight. It means her love, her loyalty, her attention are no longer diluted. They are rare, concentrated, and unshakable. So when a Sigma female stops trying to be social, she doesn't lose relationships, she gains them. Fewer, yes, but infinitely stronger. And in a world obsessed with quantity, she quietly proves that quality was the real power all along. Number 2, she understands the hidden cost of forced connection. When a Sigma female finally pulls away from the constant grind of being social, she begins to notice just how expensive forced connection really was. Every casual lunch she agreed to out of guilt, every late-night phone call she tolerated because she didn't want to seem rude, every "we should hang out" that turned into a chore. All of it had been draining her like a slow leak in the background. It wasn't just time she was giving away, it was mental focus, emotional stability, and creative energy that could have been invested back into her own growth. She realizes that most of these interactions were never about genuine connection. They were about obligation, appearances, and filling silence with noise. The truth is, half the time the conversations went nowhere. They were about recycled gossip, endless complaints, or shallow updates that left her emptier than before. And yet she still paid the price, smiling through it all as though it was her duty to keep the wheels of shallow social life turning. The moment she steps back, the theft becomes obvious. All those hours could have been spent reading, creating, building, or even just resting. Things that actually refuel her instead of draining her dry. She understands now that connection isn't free. It always demands energy, and when it's forced, it demands more than it gives back. That's the hidden cost people don't talk about, the silent erosion of your inner world just to keep up with appearances. Now that she's aware of it, she refuses to keep paying. She cuts off the unnecessary check-ins, the half-hearted hangouts, and the exhausting small talk. She starts valuing her energy like money in a vault, guarded, precise, and only spent where it multiplies. The shift is brutal but liberating. She no longer fears being called distant because she knows what's at stake: her sanity, her creativity, her growth. What everyone else sees as her being antisocial is, in truth, her refusing to be robbed. And in that refusal, she discovers a truth most people never face. Not every connection is worth its cost, and the most expensive thing you can lose is yourself. Number 3. The world's noise becomes transparent. When a Sigma female finally steps back from the endless cycle of socializing, something shifts in how she perceives the world. The noise that once seemed normal, constant chatter, never-ending updates, forced laughter in crowded rooms, suddenly looks transparent. She sees it for what it really is: distraction. A way for people to avoid the uncomfortable weight of silence. Most people aren't talking to connect, they're talking to escape. Escape from their own thoughts, from their own insecurities, from the terrifying stillness that comes when you're alone with yourself. They fill every second with conversation, with scrolling, with meaningless updates about things that don't matter because silence feels like exposure. But for the Sigma female, silence is not an enemy. It's clarity. It's where her thoughts breathe, where her creativity sparks, where her strength grows. The moment she removes herself from the noise, she notices how repetitive it all is. The same jokes recycled, the same stories retold, the same complaints on loop. It's not dialogue, it's a ritual people cling to so they don't have to face the emptiness of their own minds. And the more she observes from a distance, the more obvious the pattern becomes. Social noise isn't about depth, it's about distraction. This realization hardens her resolve to never waste herself on shallow spaces again. Because once you see through it, you can't unsee it. Once you recognize how much of social life is just people running from silence, you stop craving it. She understands that what others call being social is often just sophisticated avoidance, a kind of background hum that numbs people to their own truth. She chooses differently. She doesn't fear the quiet, she embraces it. She doesn't feel the need to constantly speak, post, or perform, and that decision changes everything. While others hide in the noise, she sharpens herself in silence. And that's why she always comes back to the world with insights others can't touch. Because while they were busy filling the air, she was mastering the power of the pause. Number 4. The chatter of the crowd sounds primitive. When a Sigma female steps out of the social loop, the difference hits her like a thunderclap. What once felt like normal conversation, casual gossip, shallow updates, endless bragging, suddenly sounds primitive. It's not dialogue, it's noise. She sees people circling the same tired topics, comparing each other's status, and exaggerating stories just to appear interesting. To her, it feels less like human connection and more like cave people beating drums to prove they exist. She notices how little substance there really is. Most of what passes as conversation isn't about sharing truth. It's about performing an image. People don't talk to exchange ideas, they talk to protect their ego or inflate their worth. One person brags about a purchase, another competes with their vacation story, someone else throws in gossip to stay relevant. It's a cycle of noise that feeds itself but gives nothing back. Once she's detached, it sounds hollow, mechanical, and almost laughable. The real sting is realizing she once played along. She once pretended to care about who's dating who got a promotion, or who said what about whom. Now it all feels painfully beneath her. She can't unhear the emptiness. She can't unsee how little people actually mean the words pouring out of their mouths. And the truth is brutal. Most conversations aren't built to connect. They're built to distract, to posture, or to kill time. For the Sigma female, time is too valuable to waste beating those same old drums. She'd rather sit in silence than nod through another meaningless exchange. And here's the irony. Her refusal to play along makes her presence even more powerful. When she finally speaks, people notice. Because her words aren't just noise in the crowd, they cut through it. So while the crowd drowns itself in chatter, she stands apart. Not out of arrogance, but out of clarity. She's realized that most people talk to avoid themselves, but she doesn't fear her own silence. And that difference alone is what separates her from the crowd forever. Number 5. She stops carrying other people's emotional debt. When a Sigma female stops trying to be social, one of the most liberating shifts she experiences is dropping the weight of everyone else's problems. For years, she was the silent therapist in her circles, the one people unloaded on, the one expected to listen endlessly, to console, to fix, to carry emotional debt that was never hers to begin with. She gave advice that was ignored, offered comfort that was abused, and carried secrets that drained her spirit. The irony: most of the people she tried to help had no real intention of changing. They didn't want solutions, they wanted an audience. The day she steps back, she notices how heavy that role had become. It wasn't compassion anymore, it was emotional labor. Every venting session, every dramatic crisis, every late-night call was a silent transaction where she paid the price while they walked away lighter. And when she finally lets go, she sees the pattern clearly. Most of them never wanted to swim out of their storms. They wanted someone else to stand in the rain with them so they didn't feel alone. By refusing to keep carrying that debt, she reclaims her energy. She no longer feels guilty for letting people face their own mess. In fact, she learns something brutal but true. Struggle has a way of revealing who actually wants to grow and who just wants attention. Once she steps aside, the truth comes out fast. Some sink deeper into their chaos, proving they were never serious about rising. Others, surprisingly, start learning to swim, proving they never needed her as much as they claimed. What changes most is her own sense of freedom. Without the burden of constantly holding others up, her mind clears. She has more room for her own goals, her own healing, her own peace. And instead of being drained by endless cycles of drama, she invests her energy where it multiplies, into herself and into the rare people who bring value back. This shift doesn't make her cold, it makes her wise, because she finally understands that carrying other people's emotional debt is not kindness, it's theft of her own soul. And she's no longer willing to make that trade. Number 6, her silence exposes who was only using her. When a Sigma female decides to step back and go silent, the effect is like turning off a power source. Suddenly, all the people who depended on her light, her presence, and her steady energy are left in the dark. And that's when the truth comes out. The so-called friends who always checked in when they needed her, the ones who thrived on her availability, the ones who made her the emotional glue of the group, they vanish. No explanation, no fight, no big ending. They simply stop showing up once she's no longer there to feed them. It's a harsh but eye-opening moment. She realizes that many of these relationships were never built on mutual respect or genuine care. They were transactional. She was giving stability, attention, and comfort, while they were taking without ever offering the same in return. Her silence becomes the test, and most people fail it without hesitation. They don't fight for the friendship, they don't reach out with substance. They just disappear, revealing that their loyalty was only as deep as her usefulness. What makes this so powerful is that she doesn't need to confront anyone to see it. Silence does the work for her. She doesn't chase, she doesn't explain, she doesn't beg for understanding. She simply pulls back, and the people who had nothing real to offer naturally drift away. And instead of being heartbroken, she feels a strange sense of relief. Because what she lost wasn't true friendship, it was dead weight. This realization changes the way she sees connection forever. She no longer confuses attention with loyalty or presence with depth. She learns that the ones who remain, the ones who don't flinch at her silence, are the only ones worth keeping. They don't need constant access to feel close, and they don't see her as a tool for their comfort. They're rare, but they're real. Her silence is not just absence, it's revelation. It strips away illusions and exposes who was only using her. And once she sees it, she never forgets. From that moment on, she knows exactly who deserves her energy and who only deserved the goodbye they never heard. Number 7. She spots society's desperation for belonging. When a Sigma female steps outside of the social grind, she gains a vantage point that most people never see. From this distance, society starts to look desperate, desperate for belonging at any cost. She watches people cling to groups, not because they truly connect, but because the idea of standing alone terrifies them. And the longer she observes, the more shocking it becomes. Dignity is traded for approval. Morals are bent to fit the crowd. Even sanity gets pushed aside. Also, no one risks being the outsider. She sees it everywhere. People laugh at jokes they don't find funny, nod along to opinions they don't agree with, and post things online just to look like they belong to the trend of the week. The need to fit in is so strong that authenticity becomes optional. It's not about truth, it's about survival in the group, and to her it looks less like community and more like a silent bargain. Take my individuality, just don't leave me out. For the Sigma female, this is both disturbing and liberating. Disturbing because it shows her how fragile most people's identities really are. Liberating because it confirms that her refusal to play along isn't weakness, it's freedom. She sees how exhausting it must be to constantly police your words, filter your thoughts, and shrink your true self just to remain accepted. And she knows she would rather walk alone than pay that kind of price. What sets her apart is that she doesn't fear isolation the way others do. While the crowd treats solitude like a punishment, she treats it as space to breathe. And that difference makes her dangerous to the system of forced belonging. She's proof that you don't have to sell your dignity or betray your own values just to have a seat at the table. Watching from the outside, she no longer envies the group, she pities it. Because once you see how much people sacrifice to stay included, belonging stops looking like safety. It starts looking like chains. And the Sigma female has no interest in wearing them. Number 8. Her standards for connection skyrocket. When a Sigma female steps back from forced socializing, one of the most striking changes is how her standards for connection skyrocket. She no longer tolerates shallow friendships or small talk that wastes her time and energy. The superficial chatter that once passed for conversation now feels meaningless, almost exhausting, and she refuses to pretend it matters. Instead, she begins to seek relationships that have weight, depth, and authenticity. She wants more than a, "Hi, how are you?" and a polite nod. She wants intellectual challenge, emotional honesty, and the kind of presence that doesn't demand constant performance. Casual acquaintances, surface-level bonds, and energy-draining socialites no longer hold any appeal. They are not worth her attention, and she knows it. Every interaction becomes a choice, not a default. This shift isn't just about avoiding frivolity. It's about preservation. She recognizes that her energy is finite, and every wasted moment with someone who doesn't match her depth is a theft from her own growth, creativity, and peace of mind. The people who remain in her circle aren't there because she tolerates them. They're there because they meet her standards, because they bring genuine insight, challenge, or emotional integrity to the relationship. Her recalibrated standards also act like a filter, quietly revealing who is truly compatible with her. Those who can't rise to her level of honesty or engagement drift away naturally, leaving only the connections that matter. It's not arrogance or elitism, it's clarity. She has learned that the quality of her relationships directly impacts the quality of her life, and she refuses to compromise that anymore. In the end, this upgrade in her standards transforms her social world. Fewer people enter it, but those who do are infinitely more valuable. Conversations become stimulating instead of draining. Friendships become meaningful instead of performative, and every interaction reinforces the kind of life she's building, intentional, grounded, and unshakably authentic. Number 9. She sees how much social life runs on fear. When a Sigma female steps away from the constant demand to socialize, one of the clearest truths hits her. Most of social life runs on fear. People aren't connecting because they genuinely want to. They're clinging to groups, cliques, and social hierarchies because the thought of being alone terrifies them. Approval, attention, inclusion. It's all a form of currency bought with anxiety, and she sees it laid bare. From the outside, it's almost comical how much effort goes into this invisible contract. People will adjust their opinions, mimic behaviors, and suppress their true selves just to stay accepted. The fear of isolation drives their every interaction, and it creates a constant undercurrent of tension and performative behavior. They are never fully themselves, because being authentic could cost them the fragile safety of belonging. For the Sigma female, this dynamic is irrelevant. She doesn't live under the tyranny of fear. She doesn't need validation to feel complete, and she doesn't fear being alone because solitude is where she thrives. That absence of need, this immunity to the social terror that traps everyone else, sets her apart. While the majority of people operate like puppets of fear, she moves freely, unbound by their invisible chains. Her clarity also gives her an almost surgical insight into human behavior. She sees who is acting out of genuine connection and who is performing to avoid rejection. And that knowledge allows her to conserve her energy for what truly matters. She no longer participates in the desperate scramble to belong because she doesn't have to. She chooses instead to invest in relationships that are authentic and self-sufficient, not dictated by fear. This understanding transforms not just her social life but her perception of the world. She realizes that most people are trapped in cycles of panic disguised as friendship, while she walks untouched, observing, learning, and reserving her presence for those worthy of it. Fear may control the crowd, but it cannot touch her, and that difference is what makes her almost untouchable. Number 10. She stops apologizing for her energy levels. When a Sigma female withdraws from the social treadmill, one of the most freeing changes is how she treats her own energy. Before, she forced herself to smile at jokes that weren't funny, laugh at stories that didn't amuse her, and mold her mood to match everyone else's. She burned her inner fuel, keeping others comfortable, often leaving herself depleted, exhausted, and emotionally raw at the end of the day. It wasn't malice or laziness. It was a learned habit of overgiving, of prioritizing social expectation over self-preservation. The moment she stops trying to fit in, that habit disappears. She refuses to spend her energy on performances that mean nothing. She no longer apologizes for being quiet when she feels quiet, reserved when she feels reserved, or different when she feels different. Her mood, her attention, and her emotional bandwidth are hers alone, not commodities for other people's entertainment or reassurance. She realizes that every forced smile and every pretended laugh cost her more than it gave. This change doesn't make her cold, it makes her deliberate. She invests her energy where it multiplies, into relationships that reciprocate, into projects that ignite her, and into moments that actually matter. She no longer tolerates draining social obligations disguised as friendship or fun. Every ounce of emotional effort is measured, conscious, and intentional. The ripple effect is immediate. People who once relied on her energy as a constant source of fuel feel the absence sharply. They notice her lack of performative engagement and may even label her as distant or aloof. But she doesn't care. She has learned that giving herself permission to guard her energy is the most radical act of self-respect. By refusing to apologize for her energy levels, she transforms how she interacts with the world. Presence becomes a choice, not a requirement. Engagement is genuine, not performed. And the energy she once gave away without thought now fuels her growth, her creativity, and her inner strength. For the Sigma female, this is liberation. The simple, profound freedom of being unburdened by everyone else's expectations. Number 11. She realizes that solitude is not withdrawal, it's recalibration. When a Sigma female steps back from the constant push to socialize, she begins to see solitude in a completely new light. It's not about hiding or opting out, it's a deliberate act of recalibration. Every quiet hour she spends alone isn't emptiness. It's a reset button for her mind, body, and spirit. The noise, the drama, the endless chatter of social life may have worn her down, scattered her focus, and diluted her energy, but in solitude, she finds clarity, strength, and purpose. She uses this time to sharpen her thoughts, process experiences, and strip away distractions that previously clouded her judgment. Without the constant demand to perform or appease others, her mind begins to work with precision. Her creativity stretches in ways it couldn't before, and her emotional state stabilizes. Solitude becomes her laboratory, a private space where she experiments with ideas, reflects on life, and grows without interference. This withdrawal from the social grind is not a retreat, it's an upgrade. While others are busy being reactive to every ping, notification, or invitation, she's strategically investing in herself. Her energy is no longer a resource to be drained by external expectations. It's a tool for building the version of life she actually wants, the one that social noise and shallow connections could never prepare her for. And the beauty of it is that the world doesn't dictate her pace anymore. She moves intentionally, choosing when and where to engage, and what deserves her attention. Solitude allows her to recalibrate not just her social life, but her goals, her standards, and even her perception of what really matters. In the end, this kind of withdrawal is transformative. It's not absence, it's preparation, sharpening, and refinement. While others confuse silence with weakness or disinterest, she knows it's the most powerful move she can make. In the quiet, she doesn't just survive, she evolves, emerging sharper, stronger, and ready to engage with the world on her own extraordinary terms. Number 12. Her creativity explodes in isolation. When a Sigma female pulls away from the constant pull of social life, people often assume she's lonely or isolating herself, but the truth is far from that. What looks like withdrawal on the outside is, in fact, the exact environment where her creativity thrives. Isolation becomes her private laboratory, a sacred space where her mind isn't cluttered by gossip, distractions, or the exhausting performance of fitting in. In this space, ideas that had been buried under noise begin to surface. Her thoughts stretch in ways they couldn't before because no one is interrupting them with meaningless chatter or emotional demands. Concepts connect, insights sharpen, and what once felt like background musings transform into fully formed visions. For her, solitude is not empty, it's fertile. While the world craves constant validation and endless attention, she craves depth. And in that silence, she builds it. She sketches out projects, maps out goals, creates solutions, and crafts perspectives that others simply can't reach because they never step away from the noise long enough to access them. What others call loneliness is for her the most productive state of being. The irony is that the very people who pity her for being alone are the ones shackled by distraction. They don't realize that every moment spent chasing approval or filling silence with noise is a moment they'll never get back. Meanwhile, she's using her solitude like a weapon, refining her skills, strengthening her vision, and producing work that has depth, originality, and undeniable impact. Her creativity doesn't just survive in isolation, it explodes. And when she re-enters the world, she does so with ideas sharper than most, with clarity others can't touch, and with a strength born out of silence. What others mistook as weakness was all along her greatest power, the ability to transform solitude into brilliance. By stepping back from the constant push to socialize, the Sigma female doesn't disappear, she transforms. She stops carrying other people's emotional weight, refuses to burn herself out for the sake of shallow connections, and finally sees the truth behind the chatter, the noise, and the desperate need for belonging that drives so many around her. Her silence exposes who was never genuine, her withdrawal sharpens her perception, and her solitude becomes a forge for clarity, strength, and depth. She learns that social life is not always about connection. It's often about distraction, performance, and fear. And by removing herself from it, she finally understands the hidden costs she had been paying for validation, attention, and approval that weren't hers to give. The energy she once scattered is now concentrated, her standards skyrocket, and her presence becomes rare, intentional, and unshakably powerful. Solitude is no longer absence, it's recalibration. It's the space where she detoxes her mind, sharpens her insights, and prepares for a level of life that shallow social noise could never reach. She doesn't need the approval of the crowd, she doesn't fear being alone, and she no longer apologizes for protecting her energy. In every way she is quieter but infinitely stronger, detached but profoundly aware, and distant yet magnetic in her authenticity. In the end, what happens when a Sigma female stops trying to be social isn't loneliness or weakness, it's awakening. It's the uncovering of reality beneath the superficial layers of society, the reclaiming of self-worth, and the creation of a life where every connection, every moment, and every ounce of energy is intentional. She is no longer a participant in the meaningless rhythm of social expectation. She is the composer of her own existence, moving with precision, depth, and unstoppable clarity. She doesn't just survive outside the crowd, she thrives, and in that thriving she becomes untouchable, unshakable, and unforgettable. If you found this deep dive into the Sigma female mindset as eye-opening as it was revealing, make sure you don't miss out on more content like this. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you're always the first to discover insights that cut through the noise. If this video resonated with you, give it a like to show your support. It helps us bring even more powerful content your way. Comment below with your thoughts, experiences, or any Sigma truths you've noticed in your own life. We love hearing from our community. And don't keep this knowledge to yourself. Share it with friends who need to see the reality of social dynamics from a fresh, brutally honest perspective. Your energy is valuable, and so is the content we create. Let's build a community of clarity, awareness, and strength together. One person, one insight, one Sigma-level revelation at a time.